So let's talk of Wizpig as superego. He is, I think, a paternal figure in several senses. One of them is just the sort of constantly phallic nature of everything that he's doing and everything that surrounds him, and phallic in several senses. In a more abstract, less directly phallus-related way would be just the lightning itself, the sort of constant kind of like threat of violence, this sort of authority through sort of the physical force that is represented by lightning, I suppose. But then also there is the actual sort of phallic symbolism of him riding a missile in the final battle, for example. And so he's riding this missile between his legs, and defeating him implies him losing control of the missile. He hadn't lost control of it for the entire race, but then as you beat him, the missile just kind of goes berserk. He doesn't have control of it anymore, and he sort of smashes into a planet, and we are shown the missile broken in half. That's almost like that image represents the final defeat of Wizpig. The final defeat of Wizpig is an image of the castrated missile. The thing is, it's almost as if losing control of the missile is sort of antithetical to what it represented, because like by doing that, it shows us that the missile represented control in some way, you know. It wasn't just chaotic lightning force. It was lightning force within the control, within a certain control, the control of the superego. So there is this aspect of rigid kind of control that is what is broken in order to defeat Wizpig in some way. And so that sort of final scene I find interesting, that it should be a castration scene. Then kind of connecting it back to the issue of light. It is funny then that light is what allows us to access this encounter with Wizpig as this sort of controlling force. But it is not just literally the light of, you know, our sort of acquisition of light through balloons, or Wizpig's own association to light through lightning. There is also this sort of seeming link, I would say, between Wizpig and rainbows. Rainbows associated to light as being a phenomenon that is the you know, the effects of light on, I guess, water and, well, on the air in some way. And you know, in different forms of mythology around the world, tend to have a kind of a generally common set of characteristics connecting them to doorways or things that lead you to another place, and this other place is good. It's the land of the gods, or whatever it may be, right? And they're also, interestingly enough, associated to messages and messengers, probably for the same reason, right? Because they are a link, a bridge, and they are associated to bridges in certain myths, right? They are a bridge between the world of the air and the world of the earth in some way. They're kind of like a midpoint. They're not entirely invisible, they're not entirely visible, or something like that. So, of course, it's interesting that Wizpig's face should be flanked by two rainbows. They are sort of the entrance into him. They sort of flank him as entrance. And then even on his home planet, right, in future Funland, the final sort of manifestation of future Funland, Star City, is also entered into via a rainbow sort of tunnel, a rainbow kind of entrance. After passing through all the exterior locations of the racecourse, you access the actual city itself by driving through a rainbow tunnel. And it's the only kind of tunnel of its kind in that level. So it clearly serves as an entrance in some way, right? In this way, mimicking the role the rainbows play on Wizpig's face, also as an entrance, and again, kind of to tie it all together, an entrance that is connected to light. After all, Star City has light in its name symbolically. A star is a light shining in the sky. It is a guiding light very often, isn't it? A guiding light for the ocean, right? If you're in the middle of the ocean, the star, like the lighthouse, it serves a similar kind of purpose. A star is kind of a way to orient yourself in the unconscious. But also, it's associated so often with wishes, isn't it? And therefore hopes and dreams. It has a guiding property in that sense, in that it is guiding you not just towards a location in space, but also a location in time. It's guiding you towards a place that you would want to be at in your life, even if the spatial coordinates don't change. I think an aspect of this role is at play in Diddy Kong Racing, since the final location that one wants to reach is Timbers Island. Timbers Island is the final place of celebration. It's just that one needs to reach this status as celebration, right? At the beginning of the game, it has been taken over by this superegoic force, and then we are guided by this light to this place that one wants to reach. And so it is this sort of union between the land of the gods and the land of earth that brings this state into being in some way. It allows for this influx of luminosity into the material world, and probably this outflux of materiality into the divine world. It makes the divine world more solidly discernible, in the same way that a dream becomes more vivid the more you write it down and kind of materialize it somehow through art, through interpretation, right? The dream itself becomes more material, and by the same token, the material world becomes more in the nature of a dream, in the sense of more in the nature of a hope, of a wish, right? It allows for the structures in the material world that were somehow causing suffering to become more heavenly, right? So both things are kind of infusing into each other in some way. And all of this has something to do in this game with the defeat of Wizpig as phallus. I find that very interesting because of the fact that Diddy Kong is the protagonist and Timber, so that there is some way in which this seems to be a process that is taking place in the psyche of the protagonist, as most fairy tales seem to be, from what I can tell, right? Because they have the character of a dream. So whatever is taking place here will be rearrangements of the structure of the psyche of the dreamer themselves. So in this case, the dreamer seems to be Diddy Kong. And so the aspect of Diddy Kong's psyche that somehow is unconscious and needs to be brought to consciousness in order for the wish to be fulfilled somehow, for some sort of numinosity to be brought into the world, right? The aspect of Diddy's psyche that needs to be confronted is this aspect related to superego, and superego, in his case, as a man, as phallus in the sense of control and control in opposition to kind of letting things be, sort of thing, right? A solipsistic sort of control where everything that isn't accepted by the will of the ego is attempted to be stifled or changed in some way, and doesn't take into account the existence of other beings, other fears and desires that are not your own. Something like that, anyway. So it is funny that, yeah, that is what is being confronted, and that therefore the game, to me it seems, is on the one hand showing us this aspect in which Diddy is projecting Wizpig as an external issue, something that has nothing to do with him. But at some level, let's say at the dream interpretation level of this game, at the symbolic structure, Diddy is constantly being associated to this superegoic aspect, right? That there is a way in which, even just visually, Wizpig and Diddy are kind of aligning. It's almost as if, again, to defeat Wizpig means for Diddy to defeat the suffering caused by Wizpig in his psyche. He needs to become aware of the forces and the forces that are operating in this, and this implies him becoming aware of the way in which these forces have to do with his own psyche, right? The way that he is inscribed into them and they are inscribed into him. And so, yeah, it's interesting to me then that this would have to do with, yeah, this sort of growing awareness through light, and therefore this entrance through the rainbow has something to do with a bringing into awareness of his own kind of, yeah, inscription into those forces. And so, of course, it's interesting then that the character of Pipsy is the one who receives this message to begin with, and it's also interesting that Diddy is happy to hear this. Like the game begins with Diddy being glad that things have gone wrong. He's glad that something exciting has happened. So he is. There is on the one hand kind of like well, there is probably a lot that can be said about that, about why, you know, is this just an unconscious kind of intuition on Diddy's part that it would be a good thing for these forces to blast out of their slumber and be made felt, or whatever, you know, to come up into consciousness, which is what the message implies, Timber's message? Or is Diddy's kind of twisted enjoyment of this precisely an aspect of his superegoic control, right? That he wants reality to manifest in whatever way he wants it to be, in a way that aligns perfectly in a solipsistic way with his desires and fears, so that if reality is what he deems to be boring or not exciting enough, then it is reality that needs to change in order to fit his desires, right? Somehow there is this double-edged sword here where his joy at this news can be read both as a joy at the opportunity to integrate this issue, and also the joy itself of superegoic projection. And of course, what's interesting here then is that Timber sends this message to Diddy, but it is Pipsy who delivers this message to Timber and everyone else. And Pipsy the message that she delivers is a message of hope. It's the message that Taj will help them. Taj is somehow this star or lighthouse here, maybe also. And of course, it is interesting that it is precisely the aspects of this game that are kind of more in alignment with what we would traditionally consider the feminine, that are hearing this message. Again, there's double-edged sword to it, in that on the one hand, it speaks to the mystification of the feminine by the masculine, in that, you know, there is this sort of stereotype of the feminine being more in control, with more in contact with the depths and with that which is hidden, right? Which this stereotype itself is kind of part of the structure that maintains the superegoic control in control. But on the other hand, the double-edged sword of this is that it is precisely this hearing of the messages of the unconscious that is the rebellion that can allow something to take place, right? It allows this message is the message of something from the unconscious being brought into awareness, right? Something that wasn't in awareness is brought into awareness. And by being brought into awareness of the stereotypes themselves that may keep people bound is allowed to, you know, to express itself in a way that could unbind everyone. So it's this weird thing in both Diddy and Pipsy, in all these characters, where it's precisely the stereotypes here that are simultaneously the cause for concern and the cause of the lack of freedom, right, for the paralysis of control, and also as symbols, maybe this is the important thing, because this is all inscribed within a dreamlike kind of structure, in that it is a work of art. Well, or in that the interpretation that I am making of it is a dream interpretation, right? It's an interpretation in that kind of character. It's precisely because of that everything that is the cause of suffering, i.e. the stereotypes and all of that, all of those things interpreted as symbols are a way for them to be brought into awareness, and for the forces, the fears and desires that are operating underneath those structures to be brought into awareness. So, yeah, I think there's something interesting going on, kind of along these lines, sort of thing. So, yeah, anyway, thanks.